Hi, this is Neal Busby, formerly of Slik Toxik, and now with Twirl, Toxyk Chyld, and Gypsy Wytch, and you're listening to Music Existence.
Thank you, Neal Busby, for coming on. I really appreciate it, man.
You're very welcome, Jake. Thank you for inviting me on the show. Look forward to doing the interview today.
Nice. Now, let's start off with your formative years. I noticed that researching your band Twirl, that you actually play multiple instruments alongside drums, which is your primary instrument. You also play guitars and keyboards. So, when you were a kid, did you sort of primarily take to drums, or was it just whatever was around at the time?
Actually, yeah, back when I first started in music, it was only drums, and I really just stuck with drums for most of my career until like around the early 2000s. And I had never played any other instrument other than in junior high. I used to play French horn. Not very rock and roll there. But so I had never played guitar. I never played bass, keyboards, anything else until I met my wife, and that we got married in back in the 1999 there. And she encouraged me to pick up the guitar, start writing songs and all this stuff. So I was a late bloomer when it came to playing other instruments. I played drums starting back in 1978, but I never started playing guitar or anything else until like probably the early 2000s, like at a decent level anyways. And
Right.
once I started doing that, I started writing songs. So really that's what started everything, was just the encouragement of my wife to say, all right, you're just going to be a drummer. Come on, do something else. So she got me on. She bought a nice acoustic guitar, and I just strummed a D chord. And I went, "Whoa, this is not so hard." So I started doing that, and now I'm pretty proficient. There's a lot of stuff I can't play on guitar, and when I can't do something, I go with guys who can, and I use them to do stuff.
That's a really good point. You mentioned the connection that you have with your wife, which we'll get into a bit later on. But in terms of taking in music, was it a combination of both American and Canadian music? Because in Canada, they have their own artists, and like they have their own hard rock artists like Fist and Thor and Anvil and all the. Did all of that kind of creep in too around the same time?
Well, of course, like being a Canadian and being a patriotic Canadian, of course, I was very much getting into the Canadian bands. I mean, some of my first bands that I was totally learning drums and playing along with was Rush and Triumph and bands like that I knew were Canadian bands, and I was very blown away by the fact that bands from Canada can become that big. So that was inspirational to me. It was like, well, if those guys can do it, then maybe I could too. So yeah, I was very influenced by those Canadian bands and a lot of other Canadian bands too. There was some great Canadian bands back then, and actually there was a band called April Wine,
Yeah, yeah, April Wine.
a huge Canadian band, and I actually played drums for them back in the late '90s for a little while. Their drummer was out sick, and I ended up so songs that I used to practice in my basement. I like to rock and songs like that. I actually ended up playing with them for real, so it was kind of fun.
That's
Sometimes,
awesome, man. That's yeah, yeah, and of course, Slik Toxik was a part of that too. Now, before Slik Toxik, you were actually uh, like kind of in that transition period where um, the previous drummer he was in the band, and then the original plan was for you to replace him part-time, right?
Yes, yes. Well, Jake, you've done your homework. This is good to see. Good stuff. Yeah, it was a case of originally what it was. They were going to go into the studio to record some demo tracks, and it was decided from previous sessions that perhaps the drummer Alex Monroe, at that time, anyways, was not ready to do professional sounding tracks. So I was called in. Not that I was a session drummer or anything. I was just the guy that was in a lot of hard rock cover bands that used to play across Canada. And because of that, I got a bit of a reputation and people knew who I was. So I was recommended to their management company by a sound guy that I knew through one of those hard rock cover bands that I used to play in, a band called Legend. And he recommended me for what I thought was just going to be some session work, which was something I was interested in doing at the time. I thought maybe I could get into being a session musician as a drummer. So I thought, yeah, good, this is great. I'll go in, I'll do these 3 songs. But I knew right away that the band was really good. Like they were quite professional for their years. They were a little bit younger than me, not much younger than me. But I really liked the music, and I seemed to gel with the band. And next thing I know, the management says, "Well, looks like if you want it, you got it. The guys want you in there." So I guess after me, there was no turning back to what was before. Not Alex Monroe. I know him. I talk to him on Facebook occasionally, and when I've heard the demos that they did with him, and he sounded quite good to me. But there was just something missing that they wanted. I think they really wanted to have somebody with a bit more musical experience to perhaps give them a little extra added boost at that time to push them to the next level. And I think I achieved that because one thing I was always good at was being very professional. And when opportunity knocked, I was ready because I would practice my butt off. If I wasn't playing live shows, I was in a practice hall somewhere practicing for 8 hours at a time. I was just living drums, and that's what I wanted to do was just playing a really good band. So yeah, I kicked their ass.
And then it speaks to, why you were brought in. And it's also cool that you mentioned reconnecting with Alex. I mean, I read that, he was kind of, even though he was kind of, they were saying, like, stay in the band, and then if we need you, we need you. But it's cool that you've reconnected and there's no kind of bitterness still lingering as far as you two are concerned.
Oh, absolutely. I guess at the time it was probably something he wasn't too happy about happening, but it's not something that I was pursuing. I was just asked. I thought at that time, I thought that at that time that Alex had just quit, and I didn't know. I don't think he was fired. I think it was more of just a case of I came in, I did what I did. They saw that it maybe sounded different, better, whatever you want to say, and I was asked to join. But as we progressed as a band and got more success and this and that, maybe at the time he probably felt, well, he missed out on something. But now that's like 30 years ago, we're all on the same level playing field now. It's not like I'm some rock star or something, and he didn't. He's a musician, I'm a musician. We talk on Facebook occasionally, and yeah, I'm no rock star. I'm a rock musician. That's what I do. I am a professional rock musician. That's all I do. But yeah, I'm not a rock star. So.
Well, in terms of solidifying those rock star tendencies, at least initially, of course, you were working on demos. You mentioned working on demos with, a number of guys, and one of those demos was actually included the song, at least on your debut album, "White Lies, Black Truth," and that was all the way back in 1989. Now, when you were coming up with that, did you know, like, oh, that's gonna be a big song, or it just sounded like a good song to your ears?
I think even back then I was able to recognize, something, a song that sounded a little bit better than the other ones, and perhaps would have more potential. And when I heard that, I thought, yeah, this is definitely something different and something special with that song that drew me in. And that's also what drew all the record company interest to the band, was the fact that we had songs like that sounded commercial yet edgy. So yeah, I thought it was a good song, a really good song.
Mm-hmm. So you were signed by EMI in 1991, and you put out an EP, "Smooth and Deadly." Now, was putting out that EP sort of purposeful in that you were transitioning into putting out doing the nasty already, or was it just like, let's put out an EP just to like test the waters and see where you go?
I think it's a little bit of both. There was like quite a bit of a delay between the finishing of the recording of the debut album and actually when it got released. I think it was almost a year.
Mm-hmm.
And the record company realized that, well, you gotta strike while the iron's hot. And people knew the name of the band from Toronto, where we were doing quite good in the bar scene. And I think they knew that, okay, we got to get something out for these guys and get them out playing across Canada at least. So some of the sessions from doing the Nash, a few of the songs ended up on the EP, Smooth and Deadly. I think it was Big Fucking Deal was on there,
Yeah.
and a couple of other songs that we had done. Then we went back in the studio and did a couple more songs to complete the EP. So I think they wanted to have it out there just to, yeah, like you said, test the waters to see how people would react to the band, but also give us some product to push, to put
Yeah.
us out on touring across Canada, which we hadn't done. We hadn't played outside. They had never played outside Toronto. I had played all across Canada before in the cover bands that I'd done, but not as originals. So that put us out there touring, and that started getting the word of mouth out there that yes, we were good, and the album is going to be amazing. So
Yeah. So doing the nasty, it had when you released that album, did success like come like completely unexpectedly, or do you know based on the following that you guys were gathering, like something's happening?
when you're in the middle of it, Jake, it's hard to even like realize what's happening. The only thing that I could tell was that as we played more and we covered more territories, there'd be more people at the shows, and next thing you know, there's more sellouts and just more people coming to see us. And of course, getting our videos out there really helped. We had two pretty big videos, one for White Lies, Black Truth, and one for Hell of a Time. And in Canada, there was a network called Much Music,
Yeah, yeah,
which
much
is
music.
which is like MTV was in the States at the time. So we had our video out on there, and once I saw that, it was like, and it was they were playing it a lot too. Both of those videos, you suddenly realize that, yeah, there's something is really going on here. That's more than I was ever expecting. You just don't realize it when you're in the middle of it until later on.
I've always read that as soon as grunge came along, as soon as Nirvana went platinum or whatever, then all the hair metal phased out, all the glam metal phased out. And I'm like, that's not true. It's like you'll find It's like the media wants you to hear one side, but if you do enough digging, you'll find that there are some bands, like I'm thinking off the top of my head, Firehouse, who wasn't really affected by the transition of grunge. They had their own success. They were one of the few bands from that original time to, stick out, go platinum, and, not be fazed by that. And that seems to have been the case with your band too when you did Doing the Nasty.
Yeah, exactly. I think it was really unfair what happened to a lot of bands like us. And yeah, it did change quite fast when Nirvana hit. But like you said, uh, didn't affect us that much. But we ended up getting booted from our record label. So yeah, it was a big deal at the time because we weren't alternative, right? And but I'll tell you one thing about Canada is we follow everything that happens in the US, right? So that's how we got signed because we were a little bit like Skid Row, Guns N' Roses, but it's also why we got dropped
Yeah,
because,
like you had the traditional hard rock backing, but with that extra edge that was very timely.
well, one thing that we had that I think would have carried us through the grunge takeover, for whatever you want to call it, is the fact that we actually had a bit of a progressive undercurrent to our music,
Right,
and maybe I had a little bit to do with that because of my background. I like to play drums, so I put lots of drums in there, right? So, and the bass player was really good too. Pat Howarth was a great bass player, and there's a little bit of progressive undertones to the music that set us apart from Poison, from Warrant. And I don't want to say there's anything wrong with those bands. I think those bands are amazing. I think there was room for everybody back then. And
right.
everybody that was any good, anybody that was any good should have been able to sustain itself. But unfortunately, so much changed, and we were told, no, 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 this is what you listen to now, what you listened to before. Don't go there. You don't like them anymore. And it was weird. But, a perfect example, though, of being surprised at how things hadn't really changed back then. It was when, in the middle of, I think it was 1994, we were on tour, still on tour, right? And we went out to British Columbia. Now, British Columbia is not far from Seattle, right? So we figured, okay, it's changed. We're gonna be slaughtered. Like no one's gonna
Like
be
all the
there.
flannels and all
Yeah,
the
yeah,
underground indie heads, the
exactly.
hipsters, everyone.
Yeah, but we got there, and it was the biggest show we did of that whole Canadian tour at the time.
Oh
They
shit.
loved us. It was great. It was great. It was like we were in the middle of British Columbia and somewhere in Vancouver, not far from the grunge capital of the world. And here we are, a hard rock band, and we were doing great in Canada. So there was a lot of things happening back then that people don't know about. A lot of people, like you say, there's this myth that they came in and destroyed the hair metal bands, but it took a little bit longer than that. It took a lot longer, and the bands that were good, well, a lot of them were back up and running by the year 2000. Like even bands like Rat and bands like that, they were back out touring. They never stopped touring. So it's a myth. It's a
Yeah,
complete
yeah,
myth.
and also like if you're lucky enough to have torn Asia, like they love you there. Like in the Philippines and Japan, they love like the glam hair metal hard rock. It's like sustained over there, and I think that's something. I think the Asian audience really has a kinship with the music and their bands. Something that, in the West, we're very fickle. We move on in like 1 or 2 years. But like you said, it all changed within 2000 when nostalgia set in. It's a completely different story. You never know. And luckily, people are still listening to you guys to this day.
Exactly, exactly. And it's funny how a lot of these foreign territories that they seem to love uh, North American culture more than a lot of people in North America do. It's
Exactly.
bizarre. Like Canadian radio stations are very very prejudiced against bands like us. They act like that whole time that we were around, that whole era, doesn't exist.
Right.
It's very strange. Like Slik Toxik hardly ever gets played on Canadian radio. And I don't know why. We won a Juno Award. We were a
Yeah,
fairly
you won that
successful
Juno,
band.
man.
Yeah, there it is.
Yeah, so even with that Juno, um, even with your biggest show you played in 1994, is that right?
That was just one of the good shows that we played on that particular tour. We done some really good shows.
So so 94 was the irrelevant era, and
Yeah.
was that when the problems with the drugs and drama started creeping in, or was it even earlier than that?
Uh, yeah, well, I mean, like any other band, there's partying, right? And it's all down to who can control it better than others. So, unfortunately, a couple of members of the band lost control, and specifically the bass player Pat. He didn't end up too good because he got on bad stuff, prescription stuff that he shouldn't have been taking, and he lost control. It was a terrible thing. Uh, so yeah, he ended up crashing a limousine at a Juno Awards party, and terrible things like that were going on. But I don't think we were that bad compared to other people, though. Definitely. I mean, myself, maybe I had a few beers now and then, but I never touched anything. Anything. I hate drugs. I hate all drugs. Everything. To this day, I despise them. But that's
Hmm.
my story. Other people in the band more inclined to party.
Yeah. So, do you think if those tendencies, those circumstances haven't affected your band, do you think you would have lasted a little longer, or do you think that time was calling you to other things at that point?
Good question. I think we could have sustained things for a bit longer if we had gotten out to other territories. Like you said, we never got anywhere in Asia. We never got out to Europe. We never even got to England. We never did anything over there. It was like we were just sort of in Canada, and occasionally we went to the States. We probably could have gone on a bit longer, but it wasn't to be. So I can't really speculate on if it would have been successful. The second album was quite good.
It was. It's like really heavy. Like
It had to be heavier because we were competing
the
with
the grunge.
competing with the grunge, competing with stuff like Biohazard and all that scene that came out too. And then there was the new metal stuff. So we went a little bit heavier. But there's some great moments on that second album for sure that we could have perhaps progressed upon in further albums. Or maybe we would have gone back to a little bit more of the style of the first album at some point too, because
Yeah, I mean, even
people
the
still love
singles
that.
that you had on at that point, like a 20 something and Dive, like those were representative of that era. That was very like a 1994 kind of sound. I mean, I don't know how far back you guys had written those songs, but coincidentally, it has that sort of magnitude.
Yeah, well, those songs came up at the time. We had written a ton of songs for what was going to be the second album, but we scrapped most of it and just started fresh. So those songs, when they came out in '95, they probably were written in the year previous to that. So they were fairly recent songs from when the album got released.
Mm-hmm.
Keep it
So,
fresh.
so after Slik Toxic, um, Was that when you joined Solus, the death metal band?
Yeah, it was. It was. The band had split up,
Didn't you
and
replace someone else at that time too?
yeah, I did. Uh, After the Slik Toxik split up, as like I said, I like to practice drums, so I found a practice space in downtown Toronto, where I live here, and I set up shop in a room that they had, and I just set up my drums there, and I used to go play there all day long. And there was a band next door. It was like super heavy, and I kind of like some heavy stuff, right? I used to listen to a lot of thrash and things like that, and I used to listen to them, and go, oh, these guys are pretty cool. And then one day I saw them in the hallway, and they said their drummer has disappeared. He just disappeared. He was gone. He was gone. They didn't know what was going on, so they said, "Hey, if you want to just casually come over and do some drumming with these songs." So I learned a bunch of songs from their first CD, and I went in, I started jamming with them, and then I wasn't really doing much at the time, so I thought, hey, if they're going to do some shows and do some recording, it could be some good experience. I like the guys; they were good guys. They were in the world of death metal. They were like very super intelligent guys, so it was kind of surprising to be working with people like that in the death metal style. So it was fun. I mean, we weren't that heavy compared to a lot of other things out there, but it was good to be progressive. We did a lot of fast, crazy stuff, lots of different time signatures and things like that. So it was good for me. It just helped me, again, get more experience behind the kit and doing different styles of music. But, you know, it can't last. You can only do so much in that style. But we did manage to do a really good CD called Universal Bloodshed. And I'm proud of what we did on that. You know, the singing is what it is. It's that Cookie Monster stuff, but the singer could actually sing, and there's a couple of spots where he sings clean, and he sounds really good at that. So I did that for a while, and then
And then
like
April Wine was that after that
yeah,
that was the childhood dream, April Wine.
yep, yep. There I was playing all the songs, say hello, and that was because I a friend of mine from another band that I was in, he became the guitar technician for April Wine back then, right? So he was working with them, and then they found out that Jerry Mercer, the longtime drummer of April Wine, he was dealing with some health issues, and he was going to be out for a certain period, probably about a year. So they wanted to keep touring, so they offered me the position. So I went to Montreal and I started rehearsing with them, and then we went out on tour. I did about 3 or 4 tours, a lot of stuff down in the U.S., and it was good. It was great. It was good fun. But it wasn't my music, right? So it was a means to an end. It was making money. It was playing shows and again getting more experience, doing a lot of good shows down in the States. But you know, it's other people's music. So at the end of the day,
So yeah, and it's like even though you've grown up with that's that sort of music, which I'm sure you have, you know, like I'm sure it speaks to you still, like to some degree, but that kind of thing can never like last, never like transition to anything if you stay kind of with what you're comfortable with, kind of.
yeah, exactly. I could have very easily have found gone on to another position in another band as a paid guy to do tours. I'm pretty sure I could have gotten a good recommendation from the guys in April Wine. And they knew everybody. They knew everybody on the classic rock circuit. So it was only a matter of time after I left. And then they wanted me to come back. Like I think they asked me 3 times to come back and play
Oh,
with them. But at that point, it was like it was time. It was time for me to actually be creative and write my own music. So,
was that what you were doing like in the meantime, like playing session for other people?
well, no, just doing a lot of cover bands and stuff like that. I was doing a cover band where I met my wife, and we were doing a cover band. And then she encouraged me to start playing other instruments and write songs, right? So I had not really started that aspect of my career at that point with April Wine. So after April Wine, it was like we started doing our own writing, and it was like, okay, there's something going on here. And fairly soon after we started writing songs, we got a little bit of action with licensing our music. So that became the primary focus of what we do is we write music and we license it. And we've gotten a lot of stuff in TV shows and some movies and things like that. So
Mm-hmm.
that became the focus, was being creative on like my own music. There's
Mm-hmm.
nothing like it.
And you exemplified that sort of collaborative spirit in Twirl, and I really like the stuff you put out. It's very um, in your face pop, but also kind of with heavy kind of undercurrents that kind of leap up unexpectedly. It's like wow, it has this sort of punchiness to it that um, kind of it's that intriguing, you know. It kind of pleasantly threw me through a loop, kind of taking me by surprise, and I think that's that's kind of what you have to do, you know, when you're in a lot of like cover bands for a while, and then you join and you come up with something like Twirl, and you mentioned your experience with music licensing. It's the material that you guys put out is perfect for that.
Yeah, lucky for us, it worked out good and worked out good really fast. And well, we have a lot of different influences. Like it's more a little bit alternative, a little bit of electronic based, and more creative. And that's why recently we've sort of branched out with a couple of side projects that are sort of looking at different styles of music.
Right, Toxic Child is one of them, right?
Yeah, yeah. Because I mean, I love that type of music, and I just happened to hook up with a guitar player, Todd Lefevre, that I knew from a long time ago, and he was in a heavy alternative band called Alpha Galati. So they were signed in Canada, and I lost track of him for a while, but then we reconnected, and we're like, let's do some hard rock like we used to love, like we used to hear, and we haven't heard so much of that. So we started doing that project, and now there's actually another new project that I got my wife singing on because I wanted to do some like '80s chick rock, right?
Yeah,
Female fronted. So we recently put out a new project, or about to put out a new project called Gypsy Wytch, and
yeah.
that's
That's her
kind of,
nickname.
yeah, that's her nickname. And I thought, okay, perfect. Let's put out a video. We just filmed a video for that, and I said let's put out a song. So that's coming soon too, and that's it's got a little bit of that '80s style hard rock, like it's like a harder Vixen, Femme Fatale, Pat Benatar type material, and it turned out really good, really cool, really proud of that. And that's just another thing, another aspect of what we do now. In addition to the Twirl stuff, that we're always writing new stuff for Twirl all the time, and that again, that's more electronic, darker, heavier, little alternative sounding stuff. But we love hard rock from the '80s too, so we're putting that stuff out as well.
Hmm.
Nothing can stop us. We're our own record company.
Oh man, yeah, DIY. That's the way to go, man. And
Yeah,
you found, like we mentioned before, we found you found a niche with music licensing. You
yeah,
had the albums Crash Boom Pop Bang
yeah.
and Replica, and I can feel the transition, you know, between the albums. Like one is like very kind of sunny, kind of poppy, and then you know by Replica there's like a lot of the darker, kind of heavier elements, kind of pushed to the forefront. So it's again, it's like a really unique sound. And as far as your recent material, you put out a single, I Pray for Amnesia. How did that one come about?
Well, it starts usually with me just messing around over here in the studio, and I just was noodling around with the keyboards and came up with actually a keyboard bass line that I liked, and I like to throw in drum machine and real drums, mix that up, and I just created the chord progressions. I thought, yeah, this sounds kind of creepy and cool. It had a nice groove to it, so I wrote all the music for that, and I did all the guitars, I did the bass, the keyboards, and I played the drums and everything. And while I was playing, I don't know, the phrase came into my head. I don't know what I was thinking at the time. It was like I pray for amnesia. It's like just a way to think about like something you really want to forget,
Yeah, yeah, like a
right?
bad like day or like a bad year probably.
Yeah, exactly. And that can happen to anybody, right? So my wife, she writes all the lyrics, and I gave her the basic outline of the song. I had done all the music, and as I usually do, I present it to her. And if I have any ideas for titles or even some lyrical content, I'll give her a vocal demo as well, and then she'll go to work and create all the really cool lyrical content that we have. So that's how that one came out. And then we did a video. The video was very interesting because we actually took a couple of guys that we like to work with,
Right.
and that's Rob Rocket, who's the singer for Toxyk Chyld, and Todd Lefevre, who's the guitar player for Toxyk Chyld. And we got them in on the video. So Todd's on guitar, and Rob Rocket is on bass this time. Well, my wife sings, so it was great. It's a nice little unit that we have now of collaboration, different things going on.
And you mentioned a really good, interesting point of your wife being encouraging, especially for you to branch out, your abilities and your musical palette. That's rare to have that sort of connection to meet someone, who ended up being your wife, but someone who knows that you're capable of doing more, and she's more than willing to support you in going that route, you know? And you see with a lot of relationships, if you're noticeably at an awkward stage, if you're unlucky, someone might be discouraged by that and say, I don't know you anymore. And then just like, and then all of a sudden you don't exist and you lose your identity. But to have someone that supportive, that's admirable, So it's great that you have the connection that you do.
Yeah, it's really, it's the common ground. You have to have that common ground, I think, to have a real successful relationship anyways. And we did right away. And yeah, she always said she wanted to do originals. Like I met her when we were doing a cover band, and she said she wanted to do originals, and she was always trying to find co-writers, right? And I couldn't do nothing because all I could play was drums. And then so she said, well, why don't you just try it? Like, see what, and she encouraged me to do it. And turns out I was better than any of the guys she was co-writing with. So there you go.
Whoa,
Right?
that's so cool, man. And again, it's like, man, like it seems like you struck gold in what you were able to come up with because, I mean, in both project, in Toxic Child and Twirl, you're able to just really lock in.
Exactly. Well, we also love the same, we all love the same types of music. Within Twirl, the two of us, I mean, we totally connect with the same taste in music. We like going to see the same bands. We like listening to the same stuff. And a lot of our music that we grew up with was the same. So there's a lot in common there. What can I, what can I say? We have a lot in common.
Mm-hmm. And as far as your new single that you have out with Twirl, um, I know you have a new project um, coming out, but do you see this turning into a full length album in the future?
Oh yeah, yeah. We haven't put out one in a long time. We just keep doing the singles, but I think at some point we'll put all the singles together and just release it as a full length album, for sure.
Oh yeah, so you have a lot of stuff in the bag that you're still working on with Twirl.
Yeah, constantly. Yeah, I'm constantly writing, like constant. I have probably, I don't know, 10 instrumentals with various states of vocal ideas and things that are kicking around over here. And we're just finishing off a new one now that we've written that we're going to start recording soon. So it's just a constant, it's like just a machine. That's what we
So,
do.
so do you have, as far as like the single is I Pray for Amnesia, does it explore like similar themes to that, similar kind of genre and thematic aesthetics?
Oh yeah, yeah. We've sort of zoned in on that style for a while. I mean, we like to shake it up, right? We've done punky stuff over the years, like you've heard. We've done sort of electro dancey girl pop stuff and things, and sometimes after a while, it's like, okay, well, we've done enough of this. We feel like doing another thing for a while. So, but you never know, right? Right now, we're in the dark, trippy alternative stuff, drum machines and darker themes and stuff. We find that interesting, but eventually we might. Well, actually, we've done a bunch of other things that haven't been released that are like 80s synth pop. So, and they're all finished songs. We've recorded them. They're just not released yet. Tons of
Oh
stuff.
wow. So it's multiple upcoming projects in the woodwork, right?
You can't stop. You just got to keep going. Just keep going.
Oh wow. So so do you have names for these projects? I mean, you've mentioned the one before which uses her nickname, but do all these other projects have names, or is it just like stuff that, like like we were talking about before, you have like just instrumentally, but you plan to expand on, as it keeps growing.
Well, there's all this diverse styles that are in the umbrella of twirl. That a lot of the anything with like the '80s influence, like the keyboards, synth pop stuff, and things like that. We'll keep that under the name of twirl. But anything that's outside that box, more in the hard rock, if she's going to sing it, then we're going to do that as Gypsy Wytch. And if me and Todd come up with anything that's like definitely '80s hard rock with guy vocals, we'll keep that as Toxyk Chyld. So we'll just keep on churning out songs. There's a second Toxyk Chyld song that's already finished, and we'll probably do something with that this summer. Put it out as a video. There's another that's
Yeah,
what's
because I
happening with
really
that.
liked Back Alley Rat. I thought that was a really good song.
Yeah, very good song. I love that song. It's a great song. The next one's really cool too. Again, it's a bit more progressive. There's some really killer guitar work in it, great singing, and some decent drumming too.
That's awesome, man. Now, considering the career you've had thus far with Slik Toxik, with the other bands that you've been in up to this point, and with Twirl and Toxyk Chyld, what have you learned about yourself, not only as a musician, but as a person?
I guess it's just my work ethic, you know. And the fact I never really think about the fact that I'm putting so much effort into doing this. It's just part of my existence. And I think that's the way it should be. I never look at music as a chore. It's what I do. and it's a part of me, and I can't deny it. And I don't know, it's just what I do and what I love to do, and I guess I'm good at it. So I'm pretty proud of myself.
Awesome, man. Lastly, anything you'd like to say to your fans?
Well, thank you everybody who has listened to our music, who has watched our videos. Um, just be prepared. We're going to keep on going. There's lots of great things coming your way. If you've listened to Twirl before, we've got lots of Twirl stuff coming up. Like I said, new Toxyk Chyld. There's the new Gypsy Wytch project, which will be out soon, very soon actually. In the beginning of May, we're releasing the video. And yeah, thank you everybody who's checked this out, and everybody who's a fan of Slik Toxik. That's great. I'm so glad people are still enjoying the music all these decades later. It's incredible. It's amazing.